Hey guys, welcome to part two. So this is kind of like the second part of the Squiggle animation that I kind of started. I sort of showed the setup and now we're ready to kind of look at the actual steps you need to create the squiggles. So we're going to look at this piece of artboard here. And you can see the artwork that we have. It's this little guy with the transparency in behind him. So what we're going to do now is what we call compose it, or put it into a composition. Now, the first step is to grab this little thing, this little piece of artwork, and drop it on top of the composition. And it's done that, right? Not quite what we're looking for, is it? Because believe it or not, it's composed it with the specifications that I'm not looking for. So I'll Control-Z that. What I'd rather do is go into here and go Composition, New Composition, and obviously Control-N if you're liking your shortcuts. Guys, if you're using a Mac, just learn the shortcuts for Mac. I haven't got the Mac inside anymore. I used to be a Mac guy, but now I'm doing PC. But essentially we're going to call this Stingray first comp, right? Or whatever you want to call it, but enough to let you know that it is essentially the very first and main composition for this Stingray. So I might actually call it the main comp, right? Let's do that. M-A-I-N, main comp. Same width, height as and the frame rate as everything else. The only thing you might want to change is the duration and make it the same duration as the little clip that it's going into. And in this case, it's this one here. So let's have a look. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the 9th clip. It should be in this file. Okay. So now we've got this Stingray comp, but there's nothing in it. So what we're going to do is double click it. Okay. And it's there. We're going to grab this and drop it in there. Now, if we zoom out a little bit, we can see that it's quite a large image. We're actually going to make it smaller. Press and hold Shift and, give it a size that we think is going to work in the composition. Okay, now believe it or not, it probably didn't need to be made as a 19 by 60. So the first technique would have made it a composition the size of the artwork. The second technique, which I've just shown you now, tends to put it in the context of the whole video size. Now, you've got two options, but realistically, I probably should show you both, okay? Because what will happen is if I just grab that and drop it into here, it'll create it the size of the actual artwork, and then all of the stuff that's happening in here is actually just the size of the artwork. That's probably a good way to go. In this case, though, this artwork is now sitting inside a box the same size as the actual video that's going to be with the kids. So I could put it here, let's say, and when I bring it in, it will sit in that direction. Let's just see how we go. But the first thing we're going to do now is probably just focus on what the animation looks like, and whether you decide to use the artwork size as a composition size or the full size of the actual final video is your choice, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is pre-comp this, believe it or not. We're going to pre-compose it. And there's a reason for it, okay? What we want to start doing is what we want to keep doing is emptying out this. Now, pre-composition in After Effects is confusing to say the least. But the way it works, believe it or not, is that you've got this main composition, right? And what you're going to be doing is constantly pulling all of these little elements out into a composition one layer, I guess, below or above, depending on how you want to think about it. But essentially, pre-composing means take everything that's currently in this composition and pull it into a new comp, but keep them connected. No matter how many times I try to explain that to people, or you know, everyone's kind of confused because it's really counterintuitive. It's certainly not the way artists think. So what we're going to do is grab this little piece of artwork, okay, and go to Layer, Pre-Compose, or in this case, Control-Shift-C. Because we're going to be doing this multiple times, we're actually going to do that. So we're going to highlight that, right? Highlight this, Control-Shift-C. We're going to name it, okay, Stingray. And we actually name it, believe it or not. Let's have a look. We're going to call it the background. We want to move all the attributes, everything that's in here, so that just includes this at this point in time, and adjust the composition duration to the entire span of the selected layers, which is 18 seconds. So let's do that. Now what just happened? It created a new composition called Stingray Background, misspelled of course. I'm going to rename that right now. Okay, so Stingray Background. But what happens now when we look at Stingray Main Comp? If you actually look, that Stingray's now gone. And where did it go? It went here. So Stingray Background is now, there's the artwork. So what we've done is we've said everything that was in Stingray Main Comp, when we pre-composed, it went to Stingray Background. That's it. That's what happened. And so now Stingray Background contains the artwork. However, we can still see the artwork because it's actually connected. So pre-composing, quite unusual, but I thought I'd just bring it up there. Okay. Now, we've got a background image and it's this. Let's have a look at it. This is a background image. This is what creates the texture to give us the I guess the jittery effect that we showed in the first video. So I've already done that, but essentially what you do is you grab it and you throw it into here to create what's there, right? We've already done that, but that's what you're doing. You're just dragging it, dropping it into there to create what's called a background in a composition. Why do we do it? Because we just want to grab it and we want to pull it into here. Okay, so let's just make sure we're in the right area. We've got to go Stingray Background, right? There's our little artwork. So this is the Stingray Background. And we're just going to grab this fully comped and we're going to do that, right? Simple as that. Now what we're going to do is the following. We're going to make Alpha Matte Artboard 3 Stingray. Now what did that do? What it's saying, in a very convoluted way, is this background is going to use that artwork there as the outline trace. So now all of a sudden this artwork is the outline of the background. So the background is no longer its own outline, it's actually taking the outline from here. Now that we've done that, we're going to do a new adjustment layer next. Okay, and it's going to be right above here. So we're going to go Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, or in this case, Control-Alt-Y. Once again, Mac has its own version. You can find it the same way. Now, we can rename this, and I like to rename it Distort. Oh, sorry, it's Displacement Map. MAP. Okay, it's a displacement map. Now, let's create the settings for it. Okay, the way we do it is go to Effect, distort, displacement map, okay? And here's the settings we're going to use. Luminance and luminance. Please don't ask me why and how. All I know is how the technique works. What can I tell you, right? In terms of all these words and quite frankly, you know, settings, you can certainly play with these settings here. But for now, we're just going to leave that as is. A displacement map now is sitting as an adjustment layer above it. The next thing we're going to do is go a new solid. So layer, new, solid. Ignore the color, but if the color's bugging you, pick a color that doesn't drive you crazy. Black's probably not a good idea because it's going to be confusing with the transparent layer there. But we can certainly call it, what I'm going to call it is fractal noise. F-A-R-A, fractal noise. Okay, because that's what it's going to be. That's the effect we're going to put on it. Just note the settings here, the width and everything. As I said, we're using a fully, we're doing 1920 by 1080. Do you have to do that? Probably not, but we have in this case. Now, the first thing we're going to do immediately after creating that, highlight. Just to make it easy for you, we're going to go back into the project area so you can see where we are. We're in the Stingray. Everything's being created into here, right? So, highlight. We're now going to pre-compose that. So, straight away. And let's have a look. Control, Shift, C. Fractal noise is perfect. Whether you want to leave the word comp on the end of that is up to you. But move all attributes and adjust the composition layer. Notice because we've only got fractal noise solid color layer selected, that's the only one that's going to go into this comp. And of course, it's conveniently highlighted and gone into where it needs to. Fractal noise comp is right there. Now, here's the important thing. I had that folder highlighted, then you noticed I highlighted the fractal noise solid before I did the pre-compose. Otherwise, that would have ended up somewhere up the top there and it would have been a pain to drag it down. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to actually double-click the fractal noise comp, and there it is, right? There's the solid. Highlight the solid, and we're going to go Effect, Noise, and it's all in alphabetical order there, so we should have found that a bit quicker. So fractal noise. Now we've got some settings to go through. Let's go through them one by one. I'm looking down here at my notes. We've got basic is going to actually be dynamic. Soft linear becomes spleen. Contrast. I have a feeling you could play with this setting, but at the moment we can start at 132, but you could possibly change that and muck around with it to give yourself a different effect. Brightness, 11. Now, transform, I believe, is next. And the scale can be anywhere from about, well, it's up to you. If you want the effect to be subtle, I think you can scale it to 40%. The higher the number, we can set it at 80, the more wobbly and squiggly it becomes. That's the scale setting. Now, the next thing we do is evolution options. Once again, another wonderful Adobe phrasing. We're going to Alt and click on this little random seed. So press and hold Alt or the, I think it's Option on Mac. Please don't quote me, but essentially the Alt key. And we're going to type in here T-I-M-E Shift, the number 8, which is the star, and then 24 or whatever frame rate you want. It doesn't have to absolutely match the frame rate that you filmed in, but it probably helps if you do. Having said that, that's the effect. What it's doing is it's creating a brand new generated little noise on each and every frame. Okay, in this case, every 24 frames. Now, if you make it 10, if you make it 20, if you make it 60, just know that it's, it's faster or slower. And of course, you can play around with these numbers. That's that. Once we've done that, what we're now going to do is go back and we can see the fractal noise layer. This is still here, but it's over there, right? We're going to hide that. We can see the stingray, nothing really changing here. And even if we zoom in, let's go to full and you can see nothing's changing, right? What we're going to do now is click on the displacement map layer. Okay. So most important, you've got to hide this fractal noise, otherwise it's in the way. Okay. It served its purpose by being fed into here. What we're going to do now is displacement map, okay, is now set to fractal noise. Let's have a look. Okay. Let's make sure we've got everything working, which we do. Now, I made a mistake. Sorry, guys. That was the wrong thing to do. This is where I was meant to go. So let me just show you again. Made a mistake. I actually did it in the track map, which is not what we wanted to do. We click on displacement map. Make sure you got the effects controls showing. This is what we do. It's got to sit at fractal noise. Now you can see the wobble, right? Now, if we really want to be thorough, we'll just zoom in a little bit. We can see what's going on here. Now you're saying, well, where's the little guy? Just turn that on. And there he is. Okay? So there's the effect. We've got that wobbly little thing happening. Use the hand tool just to move things around a little bit so you can see. And there you go. Now, that's the squiggle, right? That's the squiggle animation. And probably should have saved things a little bit sooner, but let's do it now. So essentially we've got that animation working. So what you could do now is make this a little bit more aggressive. And to do that, you go into your fractal noise. So selection key, let's have a look. And highlight the fractal noise and you can see all this happening. Where I suspect you can make your changes and adjustments is the following. Contrast. We can try a little bit like 152. Okay, my personal opinion, go back to the original and see what happens, right? Notice the contrast is a little bit not so good. It looks like it's actually weakened it. Let's just have a look. Okay, so it's looking very squiggly there. To really test it, go back to fractal noise, look at your contrast and try, let's say 100. Okay, go back and play it back. It's a little more subtle, I suspect. So your contrast is predominantly your level of wobble. Okay, it becomes more wobbly as you increase the contrast. So don't feel like you're locked in. You could try, let's say, 142, right? Now, 142, let's just have a look. If we have a look at it again, you start to see it's a lot more wobbly. Okay, so how much wobble is up to you in terms of your artwork. And you can obviously play with, I think, the other area that might be certainly, you could try your brightness level and see what happens there. Your scale, definitely as you get smaller, let's just try 50%. What you'll notice is it's a little bit more subtle and it's almost like, yeah, it seems definitely different. If we start to go to, say, 30% in the fractal noise, okay, that's the scale. If we go 30%, we can definitely see a difference. So this is what determines, yeah, you can see it a lot more jittery. So you can see there's quite a few good settings there to play around with, and you're going to have levels that you like. I'm thinking 60% might be nice for this piece of artwork. So there's all kinds of weird little settings that give it a slightly different look and feel, and they're certainly pretty easy to spot. Now, once we've done that, we can save it. Now, what we're going to do is get rid of all these now. We're certainly not deleting them by removing them. All we're doing is just not showing them. So we're going to go back into the project. Excuse me. Now, remember, the main comp is actually what we're going to be dragging in, because it's the main comp that is containing everything else. Okay, so just so to make it clear, you're not dragging these three items. These three items don't get dragged in. It's this that gets dragged in to our video. We're going to go back up to the 9th clip, I believe. This is the one that's linked to Premiere. So this is directly connected to that. So we double click it. Okay, and then what we're going to do is bring our little stingray as a layer. Now, and let's have a look. This is actually not yes, it is the layer we're going to bring it into. So we're going to bring it in. If we drop it on top, it's on top. If we drop it one layer below, it's behind them. Okay, so we're going to bring it up here. Okay, it's on top. Let's just zoom in slightly, and that's not going to get anywhere fast. So let's just do it at a quarter. We haven't got time during this tutorial to sit and wait for it. Now, it's looking kind of squiggly and cool, but it's doing nothing, right? It's actually just sitting there in the middle of the screen. We don't want that. So what we're going to do now, here's the point I'm going to make here. When we highlight the stingray and we start to move it around, see how its boundary box is the same size as the full video, right? Is that necessary for this piece of artwork? No, it's not, believe it or not. So, depending on the background or the element that you're animating, if it's meant to be the full size and it needs to fit within the entire frame of the video, by all means, you could have made the composition this big. But if we go back a step, we could have actually just done this, grabbed it, and gone into here. And then we'd end up with this little guy with all of these elements applied to it. In fact, we can do it now. I suspect what I can do is grab this piece of artwork and add it. Well, let's not worry about it now, but essentially what we could have done is all these effects applied to this. Then when we drag this video in, it would be the same size as the actual artwork, not the full size of the frame. So just to cover that off. Let's not worry about that now because we're going to confuse everything. We're going to get rid of that. Now what we're going to do is actually do the animation of the stingray. The stingray, we can just probably get it to glide along and maybe just moving up and down like that, right? So that's what we want it to do, sort of sliding around like that. So what we're going to do is start it off about there, okay? And on the very first instance, it's going to start moving in. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the stingray comp. Now, this is a good time also if you want to do multiple stingrays and not just one. So you have one here and then maybe one in behind back there. what you would do is actually copy it now. So Control D, right? Hide one, or don't even worry about the second one just yet. What we're going to do is go into the transform, and we're going to get the position going. Easiest way to do it, you could possibly go to the end of the clip. Okay, so we get to the end of the clip where these guys are there. So where the kids are going underneath. Okay, they're coming underneath. The stingray might be on its way out, and it gets to about here. Okay, we're going to position it by pressing the stopwatch. Go back to the start of the clip. Okay, and grab this little stingray and move it to about there, right? So now we've got two keyframes. We're going to right-click Keyframe Assistant, Easy Out, meaning it's moving out of this key point and forward. So let's just have a look at what that looks like. Excuse me. Now it's moving pretty slowly. And we might find that that's too slow, but let's just have a look. Yeah, it's a little bit slow, okay? Couple of ways we can affect its speed, but that's really slow at the moment. So we need that to move a little bit faster. So we've got a couple of ways of doing that, and one of them is to bring this keyframe forward, but that's not really the best way. A better way, now let's just focus on its trajectory next. So what we're going to do is move its position. So hand tool, let's have a look. Yeah, that's moving way too slow. And it's even too low as well. So let's do a couple of things here. Selection tool, control that. The position's not where I want it to be. Let's just move it up a little bit. Okay. Grab this, have it moving down a little bit. Right, so the stingray is moving, sort of sloping down. We want it to get to this spot a little bit faster, so we're going to move it and accelerate it. So now it's moving a little bit quicker. Let's have a look. Okay, it's easing in and out. Okay, and then if we're happy with its pace now, we'll sort of look at what it's doing, but at least it's in the middle of the screen a little bit quicker. Now, another thing you could do is jump to this keyframe by pressing the arrow. So we jump to this keyframe. What we can also do is use the graph editor, and we can see the speed of both its movements and trajectories in terms of how quickly is it moving to go down, right, or change its position. And let's have a look at keyframe velocity. Show graph tooltips, yes. Edit value graph, edit speed graph. Okay, so that's what we wanted to see. So just so you know, it's this little guy here. There's the speed graph. There's the value graph, and the value graph is the value of the positioning, okay? It is complex in that it's Adobe. So Adobe doesn't make these things as easy as you would like. I wouldn't muck around in here to adjust its positioning here. It gets a little bit weird, but the speed graph, what this is doing is it's basically telling us that it's going from no speed and then just quickly ducking in. And then as it gets to the peak, so this is at its fastest speed here, as you can see, it's getting faster and faster. Then it starts to slow down again, and that's the keyframe. Then it sits steady the whole way through. To make it start speeding around a little bit in here, you can grab this and increase the speed. Okay? But as you can see, it suddenly speeds up. It'll duck out very quickly. Let's just see what happens. If we can notice it. We could possibly go full screen here. Okay. We'll jump out of that. We've rendered it enough. Let's just have a look and see what it looks like. Okay. So essentially what we've done, we've adjusted the speed there. What we're also going to do now is what we can also do is make it move up a little bit. So we want it to move at this point, we want it to start moving up, right? So what we can do is that. So this is why I was saying, yeah, you could muck around with the graph and sort of muck around and kind of get involved with that. If that's your inclination, by all means you can. But I think you're better off, quite frankly, not doing that. You're far better off actually using these sorts of tools. So what we're doing, go back to the selection tool with the V. What we're going to do is grab the movement, okay, and have it sort of going down a little bit, and you can move these little handles, and it sort of gives it a little bit of a control. So let's go back a bit. It's not doing a lot. Let's have a look. So we could potentially get it to move a little bit higher. So you can see the numbers sort of, it dips in underneath and it dips back up and it dips back down. So another thing here is keyframe easy in, which means it's easing in to that point. And that's kind of how that works. What we can do now, this is basically saying ease into this point and then ease out of that point. So don't reach that point on the way in and then suddenly accelerate out. It's wanting you to ease into that point and then ease out. Now, another thing you could do potentially is to make it look like it's a little bit more animated, it could start by rotating a little. So let's zoom out a little. We grab the rotation. So we have it looking like it's sort of dipping down. Let's just see what that looks like. So it's dipping down, and then when it reaches here, we want it to start dipping up. So what we can do is change the rotation to positive, right? So you could do that, probably go a little bit less and get it down to about +4, I think, right? Just press enter. So it's looking like it's dipping down, then it's starting to dip back up, and that didn't work. Or did it? Let me have a look. No, it didn't work. So what we've got to do, sorry about that, guys. This is what happens when we don't put a keyframe in. So we start by dipping down. Yep. So keyframe, forgot to do that. We get to about here, right? And then we want it to essentially, well, we can jump to it really. Jump to the position, okay? And then just a little bit further forward, we want it to dip up, okay? So now we're going to go +4. Okay, but when we get back to here, we actually put in 0. So it's 0, 0. So what happens is it comes from a position, it's dipping down, hits 0, 0 here. Okay, we get it to ease into that point if we want, ease in and out, right? So let's just zoom in a little bit and see what that looks like. Now it's zooming back up. Okay. Boom. Now, once it gets to here, we can start making it dip back down again as well. So it gets to rotate back the other way. We can go -4. Let's try that. And we get to this keyframe and make it 0, 0 on the rotation, right? So basically it hits this point, it's 0, 0, and it starts dipping back down again. Now another interesting thing to do to kind of give it a feeling of it's an animated little creature is it gets zooms out and then you can get it to zoom back out again by just going to the graph editor. So we can see here that it does a quick acceleration, right? Well, if we want it to accelerate out of there a little bit faster, what we do is we grab this little guy and we zoom it up a little bit. Let's just see what happens. I'm wondering if there's a way to convert. Realistically, what I'd like to do, and this is like feedback to Adobe. This graph is just absurd. It's like a very convoluted way of doing what you really want, which is basically I want to speed this guy up, you know, but I can't seem to grab these points so this seems to be a way, continuous lock outgoing to incoming. Incoming velocity is influence 34%, outgoing velocity. Okay. So keyframe velocity, let's go +4. Yeah, so this is incredibly confusing how this all works. So from what I can tell, the graph editor, in my opinion, is very confusing. It's simply because the control is terrible. You'd have to muck around with it quite a bit. but realistically, I'm not convinced. So what we could try to do here is go keyframe velocity. Go to keyframe time, edit value, and its degrees. Yeah, so essentially this is meant to be the time control. Yeah, we're getting nowhere. So let's just try that and just undo everything. So yeah, we're just not really getting what we want out of this at the moment. We'll have to just to be continued in terms of the keyframe velocity. And then if I just go in, I think the best way to learn the graph editor, quite frankly, is to try a very simple movement and just make something move from one point to another and then just see what the graph's doing. Because once you've created a convoluted movement and then to try to control the speed is quite difficult. I have no idea what this thing's doing. You know, show transform box when multiple keys are selected, all this other rubbish is here, you know, auto zoom, the graph height, you know, whatever the hell that is. You know, all we're trying to do is make it quickly accelerate away. But these things, it's not like the pen tool where you can just kind of move things a little bit quicker. And then you move up and then it does that weird thing. So it's a little bit unusual, to say the least. The only other thing I can think of is you highlight 2 and then you know, do a bit of this. Control Z that. Yeah, so I'm not going to confuse you guys with how this all works, because quite frankly I haven't worked it out. You know, so the only thing I can think of yeah, definitely not doing what I'd expect. So let's see if this is working. So what it's wanting to do is, I think what it's doing is it's slowing down. Yeah, and from what I can tell, it's actually not affecting what I thought it was, which was the speed. It's actually affecting the speed at which, so keyframe velocity. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, only thing I can think of in this case, get rid of the graph editor and sort of jump to this point, which is the positioning. Okay, let's do that. Okay, and we're actually going to grab this and move it. Surprisingly. Probably a quicker way of doing it, so we're just going to move it to there. Okay, now. Okay, so now its tail's disappeared. What we're going to do now, save that. Okay, and the other thing I would have liked this thing to have done is shot off really quickly at this point. So I wanted it to quickly go boom, right? Duck out of there. So looking at it now, what I would like to happen is just to be able to scoot that up. So basically, yeah, this is where it gets really confusing. So it looks like it wants to decelerate, which is what it's doing there. Okay, that's why it's going so slow. And then it looks like it speeds off, right? This is what I want. I want the speed, but it won't do it. So it wants to decelerate for some reason. Nope, that didn't work. So I want these two. Okay. So what we want is a fast acceleration out, right? So what we're going to do now is bring these two idiots up. Of course, it won't do it, so let's just Control Z that. Would you have thought that these two values would just go up together? And it just creates the same problem we had in the first place. So it just refuses to allow me to just grab this bloody line and move it up. It's unbelievable. So what we're going to do now is grab these two guys and see if we can't change their value. Edit value. Cancel. It seems to be something to do with its position. It's not actually showing me the speed at which it's moving. Okay. So, surprise, surprise, you cannot change this to be where you want it to be. So this is obviously the speed at which it's traveling. And we just want the speed to go up. And amazingly, it won't let me do it. Which is ridiculous. Yeah, quite an unusual application, this one. I've got to really say that Adobe know how to confuse people. There's just no way to get it so that that can move faster and shoot off. If there is a way to do it, you know, this is certainly not the intuitive method. It's just not letting me grab the 2 points and just lift them up. No, it's a positioning thing. That's not what I want to do. So, don't know what to tell you guys. I'm not going to focus on it right now. Obviously, I've spent enough time trying to do this. But quite frankly, what I would have liked to have done is highlight these two values and just lift them up. That's all I wanted to do. I seem to be able to change this. You know, this seems to suggest, you know, but it doesn't allow me, believe it or not, to just grab. It doesn't let me do it. Yeah, completely absurd how that works. So you can't seem to be able to change just the speed at which it moves. So blown away that I can't just make it so that from this point to that point, it just shoots off. That's really all I wanted to do. I don't think it's worth me sitting here trying to work this out now. I think I've spent way too much time. So realistically though, you can sort of see what I'm trying to do is get it so that it gets to maybe this point. Let me just try something. I'm going to add a new keyframe. And then make that easy in. And then this point, let's jump to the next out, and then just really make it shoot off. So it gets to there. The very crude way of, you know, we want it to shoot off even quicker, don't we? So we want it out there. So basically, boom, right? It just shot off then. I mean, after all that, okay, we saw it shoot off. But really what we wanted to do was go into the graph editor. And as you can see, this is what I was trying to do, trying to create this little moment of acceleration. From what I can tell, the way you kind of manipulate the graph editor is maybe do what we just did, which was grab the item, do the crude way of what we want, and then maybe you just grab things and, you know, manipulate it a little bit more. You know, and then you can see what I was trying to do, which was grab this value and just increase it. And that was it. That was what I was trying to do. So now it just bang, shoots off. And then of course, once it gets to there, we don't care. So we just bring this in. I mean, it's pretty funny when you really look at it. But anyway, it looks to me like the graph editor, boom, it's one of those weird tools. I really seriously wonder about Adobe and what they're doing when it comes to creating. But we've kind of gone and done what we wanted, which was shoot off there. And it was done with a mixture of create it first in a visual sense and then kind of go into the graph editor and tweak it. But it doesn't let you do things like it does in Illustrator, where you can just grab 2 points and then tweak it and move it up. You know, grab this, and I know what it's trying to do. It's telling me that the higher up a point goes, the faster it goes. But then I want the other point that's next to it to also go up. Not happening. So it looks like it's quite involved. Having said that, mission accomplished. To do it again with the next one, what we can do is this other stingray, we want it in behind them. So we're going to grab it and actually move it in underneath the kids. So if we look at the second one, it's kind of doing what I wanted, and boom, it shot off. This other one could just glide across real quick, or it can come in real fast and then slow down and then take off, right? That's what we want to do. So the second one, well, that one's coming in. This other one can start, and it's this guy here, and obviously it's not even in the shot yet because it's off here, right? So this is the second one, okay? Now, what we're better off doing though is rather than starting off screen, we just want to know where is this going to be at what given point. So sometimes it's a good idea to have it up here. We'll zoom in a little, actually we'll zoom out. We'll change the scale. So the scale is going to be permanently smaller, and it's just a small little stingray in the back, right? And we might actually rotate it permanently. So it's not exactly, you know. The other thing we can do, it doesn't have to come off the side here. It can possibly come off the top here. But this one is going to be there. This little guy comes in earlier. So it's here, right? We're going to add a keyframe. We'll move it back to there. Let's have a look when it starts to appear. There's no point, right? So we want it to start appearing a little bit sooner. We'll add another keyframe. And let's just see what happens. So we go to here. Okay, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Did I not move it? Okay, that's the reason. Let's go to this keyframe. I'm going to delete that keyframe just by pressing delete. So when we get to here, let's move it to there. Sorry guys, you've just got to remember to do it in the right order. But essentially, we've moved it to there. Now when we go back, so boom, we do want it to easy ease in here, but let's have a look at this speed graph first so you can see what's happened. Essentially what it's doing is it's moving very smooth, right? So we'll get out of the graph editor. We're going to jump to the next point, and we're going to easy ease into it. So let's just see what happens when we do that. Easy ease in, right? So we go back to the graph editor, and you can see what's happened. What we've told it to do is to start off, it starts to come in pretty quick, and then it gradually starts to slow down. So clearly you can see this is speed. It goes in fast, and then it starts to slow down as it comes in, right? It's going to sit there for a little bit, but no, it's not. What we're going to do is jump out of the graph editor, pop back. We actually now want it to move very slowly. We're going to grab it, and we're going to move it to here, okay? Now, let's go back to the graph editor. You can see what happened. It was a sudden jump in speed. It's speed jump. So let's have a look what's going on. Okay. Now notice it doesn't have an easy ease on it because it's just a sudden point, but watch what happens when we suddenly make that easy ease, right? Suddenly it's gradually getting to, right? But it moved pretty quickly to there. So to stop that, we're going to move it across like that. And like that. Now we definitely have a sort of gradual move. Okay, what we might also do is lift this up a little bit and move this other point. So then it doesn't actually stop. That's what it's suggesting to me. So notice it didn't stop this time. So when we bring it all the way down to here, it's a gradual, it's a stop, it's a total stop. But when we do that, it doesn't quite stop. So okay, save everything. Now what we're going to do is this guy is going to suddenly accelerate out. So we'll bring it up a little notch. Okay. Right. So if we go out of the graph editor, we're going to jump back to that point. And now it's sitting still. What we're going to do is have it shoot out really quick, right? So what we want it to do is get to this point and then suddenly take off. So what we want it to do is this little guy is be completely gone by this point, right? But we're going to overshoot the mark. We're going to get to about here, completely make it go like that, come back, right? But we want it gone a lot sooner. So by this point, it's taken off. So we bring it in. Okay. So let's have a look. Boom. Just takes off the way we wanted it to. So what we're going to do now, go back into the graph editor, and you can see what's happened. It's just gone boom. It's taken off. By this point, it's pretty much out of there, and then it slows down. We don't want it to slow down. So what we're going to do is lift it even higher. Okay, like that. So that's kind of a tweaky way of doing it, but essentially it got it to, boom, just take off the way we wanted. So it was a bit of a weird one to use the graph editor. I'm sure lots of people struggle with it, but we've just worked it out in this video. Bang, it just took off. And so what we do is we create the keyframe visually, and then we go into the graph editor to suddenly adjust. And I think that's the way to do things. Now, another thing we can do in here, zoom in a little bit, grab the hand tool, and you can actually see, we'll get rid of the graph editor here. You can see a bit of a weird thing happening there. That's a bit unusual. So it's doing a bit of that. Now to fix that, okay, unfortunately, we're going to have to go in and see what the values are here. It looks like it's a movement issue. So I'll do the selection tool. Yeah, so it looks like something's overshot here. Right, it's basically, it's a curve adjustment that we're going to do. If we actually click on this as well, let's just see what happens. Okay, looks like we did the job. It was a bit of a weird one, but don't worry too much about being super perfect. I think sometimes animation can be weird and doesn't do what you want. Another thing we can do with this little guy that's up there is make him sort of straighten out a little bit. So at this point, when it reaches this point here, we can change the rotation. So we add another keyframe, and the rotation can be a little bit, whoa, we did the wrong thing there. We'll just Control Z that. sits at about negative 5's good. So negative 5. And then if we go back to the start, we add another keyframe, it's actually negative 9, which is what it was initially. So it's gradually moving towards negative whatever, and then boom, right? Very subtle, it's not huge, it's not, you know, make or break, but, you know, and of course you could do easy, ease in. So it eases in and then bang, shoots off. So now while we're on the subject of this animation, in here, normally the artwork should be, in my opinion, have an outline, and it doesn't. So I could have done that in Illustrator, but just for the sake of this exercise, you know, just know that this could have had a nice little black outline around it. It could still have a drop shadow. I wouldn't do that though, to be honest. I think it's getting a little bit weird with drop shadows. Forget the full size. Let's just go a quarter. We haven't got time to wait for it, but bang. And I think we've done it. You know, we've kind of got what we wanted in the end. I know we went in a bit of a roundabout way, but it was my first time tackling the graph editor. And as you can see, you know, that little guy at the end disappears. But that's that. All done. Bang, and then the second one. Okay, let's save that. And if we go back into Premiere, we should find, if we jump back and forth, let's just see what happens. We're just waiting for the Premiere to catch up. Right? So if we jump back to here, let's just see the view at, yeah, we'll do a quarter speed. Let's see if we can even get it close. Now we've got some issues with green screen for some reason. We'll probably have to fix that. There's a lot more animation you could do. You could even do a big, you know, a big crab comes in here at this point. As you can see, the green screen's got some issues. But a big crab just pops in, but boom, you know, and it jumps out. So that's certainly something you could do. Yeah, we've got some green screen there. It's popping up out of nowhere. Don't know why. Unless it's the quality. Let me just see it full. Yeah, I think that's the reason. Sorry guys, it's actually not the video that's the problem. It's actually the resolution. So it's not a green screen issue. It's actually me just sitting at the wrong speed. Now, as you can see, that's done the job. So we'll call it quits here. I'll do another one of these videos where I kind of cover it a bit more, especially while I'm on this. I know that I've got a lot of convoluted ways of getting to the point, but it's kind of like a live version where we really delve deep into, well, what is the real world animation issue that you're going to be dealing with? And you're going to be dealing with how quickly do the elements move across the screen? And that is going to be important to control with the graph editor, but I find that the graph editor is better to be used after you've kind of visually roughly moved it the way you want. It's taking the trajectories you want and it's getting to the points you want. Once it's doing that, then you can fine adjust the movements with the graph editor, but not exactly the most intuitive tool, because as you can see, the graph editor doesn't really let you grab points and do what you think you want it to do. It kind of, you're fighting against it. So you can see that it's not perfect. And I know a lot of the tutorials show the graph editor in very simple ways. They show just a nice little movement, but when you've got something a little bit more advanced, as you can see, it gets tricky. Anyway, nothing I'm showing you from this point on in terms of how to animate. The important thing is you definitely saw how to do the squiggle animation. As you can see, that background that's here, these little elements, if these were all on separate layer files, and if they were all on separate little layers in an Illustrator file, you could certainly add the squiggle to them on different levels. So you wouldn't want them all to be squiggling like crazy, because it gets a little bit out of control, but you could certainly have a little bit of subtlety to it. Now, just because it's underwater, by the way, this is an underwater scene, doesn't mean that you're limited, or this scene is because it's underwater. I'm not doing this effect because it's underwater. Even if it was above ground and it was normal animation without any water around or whatever, I would still use the squiggle effect. It's used in a lot of cool cartoons. Dr. Katz was one of them. The reason it's used is because it's such an easy way to animate without having to go through all the classic methods of doing animation, which means using the puppet tool and using all of the, breaking up the animation illustration into different parts and then making them move across a pivot point and all that parenting that's done in After Effects. So this is just a quick way of animating if the client's budget, which in this case is limited, and it certainly is. In this case, the client isn't going to spend all this money on animation, because animation, quite frankly, can get quite involved. You could spend an entire month animating a video, and that would cost a few $1,000s, let's face it. But we've done the job, I think. It's certainly been achieved. So stay tuned. We'll do another version of this, probably trim it down a little bit more, and we'll certainly get through the graph animation editor a little bit easier the next time around as well. So there'll be part 3, part 4. I'll certainly cover off all of the elements that I animate. I'll probably get a little bit more daring with it as well, have some things just popping forward and things swishing around. You might as well, because as part of your portfolio, you want it to look good. Okay, guys, we'll see you soon.